Good evening. You know, there are many weeks in the year that just kind of go by and are rather inconsequential. However, this week, the one that we're in right now, is now one of them. What happens this week will determine the course of not only the rest of this year, but potentially the entire decade. Tomorrow, Georgia will be holding its Senate runoff race, and that race will determine whether Republicans maintain control of the Senate or whether Democrats can take the majority. And then later on Wednesday, in Washington, D.C., Congress will count and certify the Electoral College votes for the 2020 election. Now, normally, this type of procedure is just ceremonial. However, 7 states have what are known as dueling electors. 12 senators and several dozen House members said that they are going to contest the election results, and Mike Pence might or might not have the power to choose which votes to count or to not count. And all the while, it's looking like 1 million people will be gathering outside of the Capitol in a giant pro-Trump rally. Let's go through these stories together. This is your 2020 election update, and I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Now let's start today's discussion by talking about what's happening over in Georgia. As you likely know, in order to hold a majority in the Senate, a party needs 51 seats. If it's ever a 50-50 tie, the vice president, who is, according to the U.S. Constitution, also the president of the Senate, can cast the tie-breaking vote. So based on the current projections in the Senate, Republicans already have 50 seats, while Democrats have 48. And 2 seats are still up in the air, both of them in Georgia. Now, if Republicans can win just one of these seats, they will keep control of the Senate. However, if Democrats are able to win both of the seats in Georgia, as well as the White House, they'll effectively be in control of the Senate because, again, the vice president will be able to cast a tie-breaking vote. The runoff elections in Georgia are scheduled for January the 5th, which is tomorrow, and things are heated, as a lot is riding on the line. For instance, Chuck Schumer, who is currently the Senate Minority Leader, he came out earlier last year, and he said that if Democrats get a majority, he would be open to making significant changes, such as, for instance, changing how the Senate votes, implying likely that he'll end the filibuster, and he said that he is open to changing the number of justices on the Supreme Court, which is known as court packing. So as you can imagine, there is a lot at stake, and the numbers that we're seeing out in Georgia are reflecting that fact. Already, according to Georgia state data, more than 3 million people have voted, either by mail or through in-person early voting. And a lot of people, as well as a lot of organizations, are jumping into the fray as well. For instance, just days before the election, Facebook decided to shut down a fundraising page for both of the 2 Republican candidates. Why? Well, according to a screenshot from the committee which ran that page, Facebook disabled them because of a policy violation. Allegedly, the page violated Facebook's policy against unacceptable business practices. Specifically, here's what that refers to. We don't allow ads that promote products, services, schemes, or offers using deceptive or misleading practices, including those meant to mislead or scam people out of money or personal information. Okay, that sounds fair, but was that what the Georgia Republican page was actually doing? Well, actually, no, it wasn't. They were running a fundraiser for political candidates. It seemed like everything was on the up and up. In fact, a Facebook spokesperson had to come out and publicly state that what happened was a mistake. An honest mistake, he assured us, saying that an automated error caused this ad account to be disabled. Sure, it's probably true. Probably nothing fishy to look into there. In fact, it's probably the same automated error that caused our documentary on election fraud, the Epoch Times' documentary on election fraud, to be flagged as being sexually inappropriate. Now, the spokesperson for the Republican committee, which ran the fundraiser on Facebook that got taken down, he said it very simply: big tech is at it again. So even though they lost several days of potential Facebook fundraising, they are apparently able to advertise again at this moment. Now, outside of Facebook, in the real world, it seems like everybody right now is campaigning in Georgia. Yesterday, Kamala Harris held an event over in Savannah. Today, President Trump is going to be flying over to Dalton. And tomorrow, Joe Biden is heading to Atlanta. So as you can see, people are taking this election very, very seriously because, again, the outcome will determine who controls the Senate for at least the next 2 years. If you'd like to read more about what's happening over in Georgia, I'll throw those links into the description box below this video for you to check out for yourself. And while you're down there looking for those links, take a quick moment to smash that like button. As you already know, videos that are like this, talking honestly about the election, are routinely censored by big tech. So when you smash that like button that's below this video, you are fighting back against the censorship, and you are forcing the YouTube algorithm to share this video out to potentially thousands of more people, letting the truth be known far and wide. Now let's talk about the House. Yesterday, which was Sunday, over at the House of Representatives, they voted for a new House Speaker, and Nancy Pelosi retained her position, although by an extremely slim margin, just 7 votes. In fact, that is, I believe, the narrowest majority over the last 2 decades. Currently, the Democrats actually have 11 more seats than the Republicans in the House. However, when they were voting for the Speaker, 5 Democrats defected and either voted for somebody other than Nancy Pelosi or did not vote at all. Regardless, Nancy Pelosi's victory as Speaker was not that surprising. What was surprising, however, was the prayer that opened the new Congress. Take a look.
We ask it in the name of the monotheistic God, Brahma, and God known by many names, by many different faiths. A man and a woman.
Amen and a woman? Now that is the first time I've ever heard of such a thing before. But this actually seems to be the direction that the new session of Congress is going towards. In fact, right here I have in my hands is a proposal that was just released by Nancy Pelosi. What's this proposal all about? Well, it includes new rules for Congress that are future-focused. What does that mean? Well, in a joint statement, Nancy Pelosi described it this way. This new proposal would honor all gender identities by changing pronouns and familial relationships in the House rules to be gender neutral. Specifically, if we look at Rule 23 of this new proposal, gender terms such as father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, uncle, and aunt, and so on, will be removed. Instead, gender-neutral terms have to be used, such as parent, child, sibling, first cousin, spouse, etc. You know, I don't know about you, but I am sure glad that Congress is finally focusing on the important things in life. If you want to read more about these new gender-neutral proposals that are making their way through Congress, I'll throw those links into our gender-neutral description box below this video. And now let's head on over to Pennsylvania. According to the Data Integrity Group, over 432,000 votes from President Trump were removed during the November election. According to this group, which is actually composed of scientists, engineers, as well as machine learning experts, votes for President Trump, both from Election Day as well as from mail-in ballots, were removed from the totals in at least 15 counties. And according to their data, when you look at the election on a time series graph, where it shows the data as it came in chronologically, you see that at numerous points in time, the cumulative amount of votes for President Trump actually decreased in various counties. For instance, here's a graph from Allegheny County. And you can see that at multiple points, votes for President Trump actually decrease, which is not something that you would normally expect, right? As more votes come in, normally they accumulate and increase. Here's another graph from Chester County, which similarly shows that at several points, the cumulative amount of votes for President Trump decreases. Now, a member of the Data Integrity Group told us here at the Epoch Times that there were vote movements across all candidates. However, we did not see the same type of negative decrements to any of the other candidates that we saw with President Trump's tallies. And they happened repeatedly with no explanation. Now, these data scientists did not just look at Pennsylvania. They actually analyzed several other swing states as well, and they found that this phenomenon was not isolated exclusively to Pennsylvania. For instance, when they analyzed Georgia's election data, this group found that more than 30,000 votes had been removed from President Trump's tally, and another 12,000 votes were actually shifted over to Joe Biden. Now, notably, this group did not name any state official, any county official, or any voting machine manufacturer for wrongdoing. However, what they did do is to urge these states to authorize forensic audits in order to investigate these alleged anomalies and to try to figure out what is actually happening. So we'll have to wait and see what they actually find, but things are now in the works. Until then, if you want to read this report that came out of Pennsylvania for yourself, I'll throw that link into the description box below this video for you to check out. And now let's talk about what will be happening on January the 6th. So we already discussed last week how Josh Hawley, who is a senator from Missouri, he became the first to publicly announce that he will be challenging the election results. However, since then, over the weekend in fact, 11 more Republican senators have joined him, and they said that they will also be challenging the electoral votes this upcoming Wednesday. And if you want to understand their thinking, these 11 senators actually released a joint statement where they explain their train of thought and why they're going to be contesting. It's a few sentences long, so bear with it, but I think it's important for us to actually go through it together to understand their train of thought. So let's read it. By any measure, the allegations of fraud and irregularities in the 2020 election exceed any in our lifetimes. Ideally, the courts would have heard evidence and resolved these claims of serious election fraud. Twice, the Supreme Court had the opportunity to do so. Twice, the court declined. Congress should immediately appoint an electoral commission with full investigatory and fact-finding authority to conduct an emergency 10-day audit of the election returns in the disputed states. Accordingly, we intend to vote on January the 6th to reject the electors from the disputed states as not regularly given and lawfully certified, which are the statutory requisites, unless and until that emergency 10-day audit is completed. Now, not only is this extremely significant, but also this type of electoral commission that they're proposing has some precedent behind it. For example, in 1876, during the presidential election between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden, 3 states, Louisiana, Florida, and South Carolina, were in dispute over allegations of voter fraud as well as irregularities. That sounds rather familiar. And these 3 states had submitted 2 sets of electoral ballots, which is, by the way, the exact same situation that we have now with 7 states. It's called having dueling electors. So as a compromise, in 1877, Congress established a bipartisan electoral commission that was made up of 5 House members, 5 senators, as well as 5 Supreme Court justices in order for them to hear claims of election fraud and determine how the unassigned electoral votes should be awarded. And according to Ted Cruz, who is one of the 11 senators who will be contesting the election results, this commission should be set up now in order to consider evidence, in order to examine ballots, and in order to make a determination on what the outcome should be. Now, we here at the Epoch Times, we've actually been keeping a tally, and according to public statements that we've been able to amass, besides the 12 senators, there are now 45 members of the House who have also committed to objecting the election results. And in terms of how this all will work, during the joint session on Wednesday, if 1 House member and 1 senator object to the electoral votes in a given state, then a certain process will be triggered. This is the process. Both chambers will withdraw, they will deliberate for 2 hours, and then they will vote on whether to reject the state's electoral votes or not. Now, there are 2 interesting things to note here regarding this process. First of all, Mike Pence, who is the president of the Senate and will actually be presiding over this joint session on Wednesday, he has expressed his support for these Congress members in challenging the Electoral College results. Here's a statement from Mike Pence's chief of staff. Vice President Pence shares the concerns of millions of Americans about voter fraud and irregularities in the last election. Now, the reason that that statement is so interesting is because Mike Pence has been a bit of a wild card. He has been relatively quiet about his thoughts on the matter of election fraud. And some people were speculating whether he was in support of this type of process, which apparently, according to this new statement, he is. Now, by the way, if you want to know a bit more about Mike Pence's unique role in this process, as well as what his special powers might be, we discussed that in an earlier episode, and I'll throw a link to that in the top right corner here for you to check out. Now, the other thing to know, the second thing of interest, is that President Trump has announced that evidence of alleged voter fraud will be presented during this joint session of Congress. In a tweet, he wrote that, "Massive amounts of evidence will be presented on the 6th. We won big." Okay, so what's going to come from all this? What's going to come from this process? Will any of the state's electoral votes actually be rejected? Will this new election commission actually be set up? Well, I'm not sure, but we'll know by Wednesday. Now, I will actually be down there in Washington, D.C., reporting from the ground on January the 6th. And that's because, among other things, not only is this joint session of Congress going to be happening, but outside there's going to be a massive protest, maybe one of the largest in U.S. history, where an anticipated 1 million people will show up in support of President Trump. In fact, just yesterday, President Trump confirmed that he himself will also be there, which I imagine will draw an even bigger crowd. So let's see what happens. If you'd like to read the details about this proposed election commission, about which senators and House members are going to be contesting the results, as well as Mike Pence's statement on the matter, those links will all be in the description box below this video. Otherwise, if you haven't already, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, subscribe to this channel if you want to get this type of honest reporting delivered right into your YouTube feed, and until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed and stay free.